Okay, another build completed. This one was the Radeon 5500XT with the Ryzen 3 3100. This is one of my more popular builds because it's a budget build and you can get the parts all for around 700 bucks. So it's a pretty popular option. The thing about this is that this is designed to be just a simple gaming build. You're probably not going to be doing too many crazy video editing things on this, but you are going to be able to game at around 80 to 100 frames per second, if not more, just depending on the game you're playing. But for the modern high graphical games such as Modern Warfare, Fortnite, Call of Duty, Black Ops, you're going to probably be in the 80 to 100 range with this build. Perfectly fine. And the nice thing about that is that if you do things right, you can make it, fairly future-proof by just make sure you use a motherboard that can support upgrades you might want to do in the future, such as getting a better computer chip in there or getting a better GPU in there in the future. But if you're looking for just the basic bare bones, I want to game now, and want to be able to put a lot of storage on my PC just to get started, this will work. So what I'll do is I'll go over the pricing of this first, explain all the parts, and then I'll get into the build video, but give you some other pictures. This is just even with RGB, it's a pretty simple build. So let me get into the pricing, and then we'll get into the build video. So for this build, when I mention future-proofing the board, I'm using a B550M motherboard. B550 is a chipset that can handle the current high-end Ryzen chips, like the 3000 series, the Ryzen 5 3600, the Ryzen 3 3100, 7 3700X, etc. And it's going to handle the 5000 series CPU chips that are already out, but their stock is horrible, so it's hard to get them. So the Ryzen 7 5700X, the Ryzen 5 5600, things like that. So that's what I mean by future-proofing. And not to mention, if you're looking at a GPU, let's say you want to upgrade to a 5700XT, or the new AMD GPUs, the 6800, etc., or the 3070 from NVIDIA, 3080 from NVIDIA. Those all use PCIe Gen 4 speeds, and the 550 chipset can handle it. So that's what I mean by future-proofing. So here's the pricing. It's pretty simple. We went with the Ryzen 3 3100, which is a 4-core, 8-thread chip. Totally workable for normal gaming. If you're going to be doing video editing or higher end stuff with your computer, obviously upgrade that. But if you want to game and you want to just use your computer for general office stuff, things like that, this is a perfect CPU, budget CPU. It's hard to find. If you don't order it online, you have to wait maybe a week to get it. But if you're looking for a budget, that's a good one to go with. Your power supply, you don't really need more than a 550 watt power supply for this one, but on Amazon they have some really good deals for 650, 850 if you want to go higher. I start all my builds with 500 gigabytes of storage. I always use an M.2 device because that's the fastest storage you can get, and you want to have your operating system on that. So I start at 500 gigabytes. Obviously, if you want to increase that storage space, you can. Increasing storage space is very easy. Either add another M.2, add a solid state drive, or add a hard drive, a mechanical hard drive. All will work, especially if you're working with mass storage. But if you're doing anything with if you're putting any applications on a storage device, try to get an M.2 or a solid state drive, and you will have a much better loading experience. I always go with 16 gigabytes of RAM for gaming PC, and I try to get them in the 3000 to 3600 megahertz range, somewhere in there. I kept this one at 3200 megahertz. You're going to game great at that speeds. If you want to maybe pay $30 to $40 more, go with 3600 megahertz. But that's more for you're getting higher end, at that point. And I went with the Musatex Atx Case. This is a nice case that has RGB for just 70 bucks. So if you're looking for a nice, simple option, this is a good case to go with. I will tell you, I've had some problems ordering it online. Sometimes they come without the fans. You have to send it back and get a new one. Sometimes it comes without a way to control the RGB. Just be aware of that. I haven't had the best experience buying them. I've had to return some and get new ones replaced. But when it comes in right, it's a very good case. So you can see the parts total is around 682. If I was to sell this build and do the build for people, I make sure that I mention the tax in there, my compensation. Overall, somebody would pay me about $838 to make this build. But if you're looking for just a good build to get started and you're on a budget, this one will work just fine. So hope this helps, and let's get into the build video. Okay, for this build video, I'm going to start with the motherboard. Now, I don't have the RAM that I need to use with your build yet, so I'm going to use an extra piece of RAM that I have to get Windows installed, but I want to explain the motherboard right now to start off. On the motherboard you have, this is the B550M Pro VDH Wi-Fi motherboard, and on it you have your RAM slots, your CPU slot, and you have one M.2 slot up here and another one down here. These are for storage drives, the fastest storage drives out there. On the right side over here you have your SATA, sorry, these ones right here. Those are your SATA power slots, so if you ever plug in a hard drive or a SATA SSD card, like one of those SATA SSD drives, you actually would put them right over there to add even more storage. So plenty of storage space on this board. As you get using the board, you'll understand more and more. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to actually show you how I would actually get this ready to have Windows installed on it. The first thing you do is you look at your RAM slots. The motherboard will tell you the best configuration for the RAM. That usually goes furthest out, and then second one, so it usually goes every other, furthest out, skip one, and then add one, and then you add the other two as you get more sticks. So for yours, I'm going to have 2 sticks of RAM here when I get it, one on the outside slot and one on the second inside slot to represent that will connect to the internal memory channels on the CPU chip itself. I put into here your M.2 drive. This is going to be your operating system as well as your main apps. It's 500 gigabytes. It's plenty to get started. Again, as you need to add storage, you literally just plug it into the side here or add another M.2 drive and you're up and running once you format that, which is very easy to do in Windows 10. But the brain of the unit is actually right here, the Ryzen 3 3100, which is a great budget CPU. It's going to get you pretty darn far. You can game very well on this. Maybe not the best for video editing, of course. You want more CPU power, but for just general computer use and you want to enjoy a good computer, this is a perfect $100 to $130 option, depending on when it's purchased option. So what I did is, it's actually really easy to put in. It only goes in one way. No matter how you turn it, it's only going to sink in one way. And you can see a little gold triangle on this corner that corresponds to the triangle on the corner on the outside as well. But anyway, you'll know that it's right when it just sinks in. Like, you'll see it just sinks right in, it just clicks in, and you pull down this lever and click it in, and it locks that into place. Now what I need to do for this chip though is I got to put the cooler on there. This is the cooler. You can see it has like a thermal, this is called a thermal pad, thermal paste, that sticks to the top of the chip to suck up the heat basically to keep it connected, and so that this metal part has all the heat and this fan is cooling it down. So this is your CPU fan that we're going to be running on it. So I'm going to just pop that on top, screw it down, and plug in the fan right up here. It's called the CPU fan, and then the motherboard's going to be good to go, and I'll just put the graphics card on there. So that's what I'm going to do. I got the RAM secured. I'm going to put the fan on. I'm going to secure this down. There's a little heat sink with this motherboard that this goes on top to keep it cool, and then we'll get to the graphics card. And there you have it. It's all situated, and just remember the one thing that's going to be different on yours when I get it shipped to me is you're going to have one more stick of RAM right here, 2 spots filled, heat sink on top of that M.2 drive, and the fan's on. So now I'm going to pop the graphics card inside. So the graphics card is the 5600XT. I'm going to unbox this and let's explain that real quick. Here is your PowerColor 5500XT. Not the most glamorous card, not the most high-end card, of course. It's just a normal, basic graphics card that is going to do the job. The 5500XT, the reason people get these cards, the 5000 series cards, is because almost all of them, there are some versions that don't have it, but almost all of them, including this one, has 8 gigabytes of RAM. Some only have 6 gigabytes of RAM. Some only have 4, but most have 8 gigabytes of RAM. And on top of that, there's usually pretty good heat sinks on all of them and good clock speeds, meaning that it's going to be running pretty darn fast. You should be able to get, I want to say anywhere from 80 to 100 frames per second on modern games at normal HD settings. So how to put this inside the on top of the motherboard is you actually take the connector here, this little piece of the back, and you put it right into that gray slot right beneath the M.2 drive. It goes right in there. That is your 4th generation speed PCIe slot, which is the fastest slot on the market. And all I'm going to do to make sure it fits is I'm going to pop this open, click it open. I'm going to take the card and I'm going to slot it right on in. I know it's kind of hard to see. Let me move my motherboard out a little bit. And I'm going to pop her right in there. Now, it's not super stable because I'm not in the case yet. Now, the reason I'm not in the case yet is because I don't have the case, but also I want to just test all these components now, get Windows installed so that when it's time for the case, it's an easy put in the box and go. So now all I got to do is power it. I'm going to take the power cable from the PCIe slot. Sorry, I'm going to take the power from the power supply that I'm using right now and pop it right on in there, and we'll be able to boot Windows up. Okay, so to boot Windows for the first time, I need to make sure that my power supply is turned on and that I have my HDMI cord plugged into the graphics card. So your motherboard has several, just plug this in here, sorry. Your motherboard actually has another HDMI and a DisplayPort connector on the motherboard side. You actually cannot use those because your CPU doesn't have graphics itself. This is where the graphics is coming from, so make sure that all your display is coming out of this graphics card, and it looks like you have a DisplayPort, an HDMI, sorry, a DisplayPort, an HDMI port, and a DVI port. So you have 3 monitors you can hook up with one of those settings. And here's what's kind of cool, is that I'm going to kind of pretend that I'm the case, and I'm going to just press the little switch here, and it actually turns it right on. So what I'm going to look at when I boot it up for the first time is these little LEDs. It's going to cycle through those to make sure that the CPU, the onboard RAM, it does check the graphics of the motherboard if that's okay, if there's a problem there, and it goes into the boot sequence just to make sure that everything's ready to go. So I'm going to just follow those LEDs. You're going to see it cycle through those. It's blinking on the CPU to check it a few times, and I'm going to simply wait for it's done cycling. You can see it's on the VGA now, and once this is done cycling, we're actually going to see, so it's basically done cycling. Here is the screen, and it tells you your processor. It tells you your RAM that you have installed. So right now it's 8 megabytes of RAM. 8 gigabytes of RAM. That's fine for me. I'm going to just press F1 to get into the BIOS, and I'm going to install Windows. I'm going to put my installer on, and that's really all it is. And Windows is installed just by a flash drive, just by a little flash drive. You actually can put the installer from the internet right onto this and install Windows, and that is it. I'm in the BIOS. It's working. I can see when the BIOS was made. Yada yada. I might update that BIOS. I don't think it's fully necessary. July, if it's working, there's no reason to update the BIOS. Maybe in the future down the road, if you get a new CPU, maybe update the BIOS then just to make sure it's all working. But these chips are definitely working on the July BIOS, so I might not even touch that. So that is it. I'm going to go ahead and plug this in, install Windows, and next screen you're going to see is Windows installed and me running updates. One thing I did want to show you is when I'm installing Windows, I'm installing Windows 10 Home. Now, I do not have an activation key for this. Those actually need to be purchased if you want to have an activation key. The only difference between activating a Windows system versus not activating a Windows system is essentially you're going to have a little watermark that appears in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen on occasion to remind you to activate it. But you do not need to activate Windows to run any Windows program. I just want to make sure that's clear out there. It's up to you if you decide to activate it at one point. When you activate it, you have access to Microsoft support. You also have the ability to do some sort of like remote desktops with your phone, things like that. But I'm going to install Windows 10 Home so that if you do decide to activate it, you can. It costs, well, if you do it through the Windows Store, it costs like $130 to activate. And if you do it, but I see that there's other ways to get keys for cheaper. So just keep that in mind, that you will see Windows reminding you that you're not technically activated, but that will not hinder you from doing anything on your computer. Okay, so Windows was installed. I was connected to the internet, and I went ahead and ran the Windows updates. Make sure that we're all up to date, so I'll check one more time to make sure it's all checked again. My computer keeps telling me I need to restart, which I will do in a moment. So Windows updates are completed, and then what I did is I went to the browser. I went to the MSI website. Let's see if you can see this here. I went to the MSI website where the motherboard information is, and what you can do is you can type in your motherboard, go over here to the support page, and this is where you come down and look at the drivers and just download all the drivers you need. You're going to need the chipset drivers, the SATA drivers for RAID you're not going to need because you're not using RAID, which is where you can have multiple hard drives all acting as one, which you're not going to do. So we have chipset drivers, and we have the LAN drivers, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, and Ethernet, and then your audio. So I just basically downloaded all of those, and let me X out of this, and you can see right here is where I brought them all. These are all the drivers, and I just basically ran the setup for them. I also downloaded the Radeon software driver. This is the driver for the graphics card. You need the graphics driver as well. So I downloaded all of them, and now my PC is begging me to restart. This is asking me to restart, the AMD Radeon software is asking me to restart, and the AMD chipset for the the CPU is asking me to restart. So I'm just going to go ahead and click restart, and let this reboot back up, and we should be done with the Windows setup, so we can install games and whatnot when you're ready. So this next section I'll go through step by step. The first thing I did is I basically put the motherboard inside the case. The case has standoffs that look like this all throughout the case. This is for either a small motherboard like this one, even smaller if you had it, or one that's larger. But obviously if it's right in there, I can take these out later. And our case is now in there. We just basically stand them off on the standoffs that are provided. And on the left side, we put the I/O shield, the input-output shield that has all the input-outputs for your motherboard. So that is now inside, and now we're going to put the power supply in to actually get everything plugged in, as well as the front panel headers, which you see on this side down here. We're going to get all those headers connected to the motherboard as well. So as you can see, what I've done now is I've connected all the front panel headers and the power supply. On the left over here is the audio jack on the front panel. I'll show you this in a moment, but it's pretty self-explanatory. The motherboard tells you exactly where they go. Audio jack. Here's an extra USB port that's on your front panel. Here are all the power connectors, so like your to turn it on and off, and to reset it. Right here is your RGB header for the fans that come with the case. Most motherboards have some sort of RGB header, so you can actually make sure that the lights get RGB. And then up here you have your 24-pin connector that goes to the power supply. Up here is the 8-pin connector that's going to the power supply. And right here is the other USB connector at the top of your case. And what you can see here is this is your power that's connected down there. You have 1, 2, 3 USB ports, and there's your audio. So that's what's all been connected. Now your power supply itself has been put in. It looks like it's upside down. That's because there's a little air gap space underneath here with a dust filter right here. That's going to collect all the dust that's going to be sucked into your power supply that it's going to use to keep it cool. That's why it's upside down like that. So I'm going to do a little bit of cable management on the back here. This little hub that you see right here is actually for all your fans that came with the case. It was really convenient. This is going to be controlling your RGB. So this is going to look pretty darn good once we're done with it, and I'm looking forward to it. So last thing before we boot it up is I need to put the graphics card back in right in this slot and tie it down and connect it with power. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to pick it up, pop it right on in. It's going to stick out the side of the case here. I'm going to tighten it down, and we're going to test this and boot it up. All right, let's do an initial boot. Everything's plugged in. Give it a second. There it goes. And of course, we'll change the colors here. If you just click this thing on top, it actually goes through all the modes, but there's also a way that you can edit the lighting via the MSI software. So, very, very cool. I'll leave it like that for a second. And now I'm just gonna check out Windows. All right, it's booted up. It is looking good. Last thing I'm gonna show you is how to control the RGB. One moment. Okay, so on your case, the button that you press up here, if you hold it down for 3 seconds, it's going to transfer control of the RGB to the motherboard, because remember we have this little header in here, so the motherboard can control it. And on the computer, there's an app called Msi Dragon Center. So let me just change this real quick to just to make sure it's working. We'll go breathing yellow or green, whatever this is. Say apply. Now you can see it's breathing that yellow-green color. Or I could change it back to rainbow, say apply. Let's see what this looks like. Yeah, now it's back to rainbow. So I think you might enjoy using this more than just pressing the button. So I mean, I'll go back, let me press this for 3 seconds. 1, 2, 3. And now it's back to being controlled by the button, right? So I can just press this button to change throughout the modes. It's whatever you like. Just play around with it however you want. So I'll just go ahead and press this for 3 seconds again. So now I'm back to the motherboard control, and I can just change this to literally whatever I want. Double meteor, what is this? Apply. All right, so now it's goofing around. Anyway, just wanted to show you that so you can see how the RGB worked. So it's good to go.